In this episode, we will be discussing rape culture from beginning to end. I am Jocelyn.
And I'm Wendy.
And we are her story. The problem of sexual assault and rape culture starts at the very bottom. It starts with normalization, and this usually has to do with sexist attitudes, rape jokes, locker room banter, stalking, unwanted non-sexual touch, and catcalling.
So an example of normalization can be like a rape joke, and an example of this can be, let's say, when a girl is hanging out with her boyfriend and her boyfriend makes a comment which basically insinuates that he would take advantage of her, and like the girl like doesn't believe it, so like she asks like, are you actually being serious about this? And he can just like say no. He's saying that like it's a joke and like it wasn't meant to be serious, and he can laugh it off. And like this contributes to the normalization because they don't get like punished for it or prosecuted for it, since it's just like something that they say. Since the guy is making these type of jokes, it means that he has actually thought about like doing something to his girlfriend, which even though he shouldn't, because that would be taking advantage of her. And can also tie into like the locker room banter, because this is a place where there's often lighthearted jokes, but oftentimes it can be inappropriate and controversial. And since it can be like inappropriate, they tend to make these types of jokes more. But since they're just jokes, they don't take them seriously, even though like they should be. So rape jokes and the locker room banter can also be tied into sexist attitudes, especially within certain cultures in which the man is viewed as someone who has like authority over other people, especially women, and that they should be listen to the guy. And these men tend to have a misogynistic view of women.
There are other layers to the normalization of rape culture, and that would be catcalling, unwanted non-sexual touch, and stalking. So catcalling refers to making a whistle, shout, or comment of a sexual nature to women passing by. Catcalling gives women unwanted attention that they never asked for in the first place, and it makes them uncomfortable. And catcalling also contributes to normalization, as many people, especially men, or sometimes even some certain women, will defend catcalling, saying that it's a compliment and that women should be grateful that they're being viewed this way, when in reality it isn't, because it starts as catcalling and then eventually maybe it can turn into not only unwanted comments towards their body, but also unwanted touching. And usually this can be an unwanted non-sexual touching. So it doesn't specifically mean that they're going to be touched in their private areas, but it can usually start in small ways, like on their shoulder and other areas. And this normalization of just touching people, or specifically women whenever, also makes them uncomfortable, as you shouldn't touch anyone if they don't feel comfortable doing it. So it's always important to like ask for permission, no matter in what way or format you, I guess, plan on touching someone. And then stalking. I know in media there's a lot of normalization towards stalking, and this usually is tied to both men and women. For men, it could be viewed as romantic for stalking, because especially with book talk recently, it's been viewed as romantic for men to be stalking women, as it's seen as like a nice gesture, I guess, of them having this attention and desire for like a certain woman. But in reality, this normalization of stalking also leads to sexual assault and worsening rape culture. So it's all these acts, all these little acts, and people defending it and normalizing it can eventually lead to sexual assault.
So she has this coworker, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so she has like certain body parts, right? And so she would go into this store, and there was this old guy there, and the old guy would let her just take anything from the store. But like as long as she would like expose herself, I guess. And she didn't mind, I guess, because she said like, oh well, this doesn't mean that I actually have to partake in like intimate things with this man. I just have to like show him stuff. So she said that it was fine, until up to a certain point where the guy said that it wasn't okay for her to just keep on taking if he wasn't gonna get like something in return. Yeah. And then that's when she stopped going to the store, because then she actually thought about it, and she was like, oh no, like next time I go into the store, there could be like a chance where I'll get like harassed or like raped or something.
Moving up the pyramid of rape culture, normalization can lead to degradation, and there are various examples that show the acts of degradation, and this includes victim blaming and shaming, coercion slash manipulation, threats, revenge porn, safe word violations, groping, non consensual photo or videos, flashing and exposing an unsolicited nude pic. Another example you can say is like safe word violations. So, for example, if you're on social media, then you would, and you're gonna know what I'm talking about. But there was this girlfriend and boyfriend, and basically, it's gonna sound weird, but let's say the boyfriend asks if he can bite his girlfriend, and let's say like her arm, and she's okay with it. And at first, she has some boundaries where it's like she has a safe word, and when she says it, it means like it's starting to hurt, or like he's hurting her. And eventually the boyfriend refused to obey or listen to the safe word, and he would keep going to the point where she starts bleeding in the area. And this type of degradation can eventually escalate into like other serious crimes, one of them being rape. So it's important to listen to these safe words, because, or if anyone ever violates a safe word whenever you're using it, it's important to consider that if they're not willing to listen in that certain situation to that safe word, then you should consider the fact that they might not listen to you in other situations where you might be saying no. So yeah, another form of degradation is victim blaming and shaming, and this usually has to do with phrases like they ask for it, you could slash should have said no, look at how they were dressed, they are just crazy, that wasn't really rape, and they want to ruin that person's life, and etc. And I think the most like notable phrases that are used for victim blaming is the question, what were you wearing?
I feel like with these like phrases that these people say, like besides like basically ignoring the whole point of what happened to them, it also makes them feel like completely like invalidated. It makes the victims feel guilty even though they aren't, which degrades the victim and just takes away like the whole validity of their claim, which like let's say in a scenario where she has to like report to the police or something, and like people around her are just telling her, oh well, like she asked for it, or it was like, oh it's because she's like wearing a certain thing, and like all of this ties into rape culture, because it's being seen as like, oh well, like she did this and that, and like that's why it happened to her, so she shouldn't be like complaining, which like leads to degradation.
I feel like it could also go back to catcalling, and how men and women too, I guess, will just say, oh, it just means you're beautiful, or it's like they try to defend or normalize it by saying like you should be grateful they did this because it means someone wants you. When in reality it's obviously not. When this happens, it's horrible, like you dehumanize and degrade someone. But it just kind of shows how this all starts with normalization and defending this behavior, and by like trivializing and minimizing this behavior. And again, it could be tied back by when people use phrases saying that boys will be boys, or when they are introduced to an experience where someone has faced sexual violence, they respond to it by saying that it's no big deal. So it just shows how this normalization just leads to the degradation of victims, and how this culture can lead to assault.
At the top of the pyramid, we have rape, drugging, molestation, stealthing, which includes covert condom removal and contraceptive sabotage. And so an example of assault is contraceptive sabotage, also known as reproductive coercion. Is a form of abuse where a partner deliberately interferes with a person's reproductive health choices, often to force an unwanted pregnancy. This can involve actions such as hiding, destroying, or tampering with birth control, refusing to use condoms, or pressuring someone to get pregnant when they don't want to.
And kind of relating to contraceptive sabotage, stealthing is the practice of removing one's condom during sex without the knowledge and consent of one's partner, frequently regarded as sexual assault or rape and punishable by law in many places such as England and Wales.
And these two things can tie into assault because you're doing something without the consent of your partner, and this further leads into the rape culture because it's something that they're allowing it to do, and it's like could be like normalized. And like a lot of the impacts of it can be like, for example, psychological distress, which leads them to have feelings of fear, powerlessness, anxiety, and depression. And there can also be like a lot of health risks because, for example, let's say if a woman, let's say she has like a high blood pressure rate, and like let's say if she were to have a child, it could possibly put her and her child in danger. And so like maybe that's like a reason why she doesn't want to have children. But with her partner doing this, he is putting her life at risk, can be like punished.
And also, it's important to note that these are unintended or unwanted pregnancy, so those can usually lead to complications throughout the pregnancy and childbirth, like Wendy said.
Oh, and also if the partner like did that, like that means that they're also able to do like even other like more worse things.
Contraceptive sabotage can be linked or could result in even increased risk of other forms of abuse.
Because like if they didn't listen to you then when you told them how to like keep the condom on and stuff, that means that they like won't listen to you in other like
scenarios.
Yeah.
So yeah, which is why contraceptive sabotage is often linked to other forms of IPV, including physical, emotional, and verbal abuse. And then stealthing would be essentially be the same thing. It's the same thing. It's just that contraceptive sabotage has more to do with the pill, the birth control, and all that. Meanwhile, stealthing would have to do more like with the condom. But they're essentially the same thing, and they're both things you would have to worry about. So after all this normalization, degradation, all of this can eventually lead and culminate to molestation, drugging, and rape. This is what happens when society normalizes this behavior, and eventually also when society starts degrading victims and again normalizes this unwanted sexual nature, because eventually all of this can lead to men, especially men, acting this way towards women, thinking that they can just use them in this way.
An example of this can be like the feminicidios seen in Mexico, which have been like on the rise now. And this is all happening because in that society they have like a certain hate towards women because they don't do like certain things, which shows like a very extreme consequence of letting men and like letting society just go unchecked.
But yeah, that's about it. That was our discussion regarding rape culture. If you want to learn more about empowerment and solutions, then you should check out our other podcast episodes. The previous one talks about prevention, so if you want to learn or if you want to educate yourself more, then you could definitely check that out, or our other episodes where we discuss the problem, systematic and structural failures, and resources for people who want to reach out after sexual assault. But yeah, this is our final episode for this season. We are gonna go on a little break for a few months, but when we come back, we'll definitely give that episode we promised last episode, because we were not able to do it this time due to legal liabilities and restrictions, but we'll definitely have things figured out in a few months. But yeah, that's about it. Thank you to everyone who has supported us throughout these episodes and videos. And yeah, just stay safe. And if you ever need resources or if you want to learn preventative measures, then you can just check out our past episodes. But yeah, thank you. And my name is Jocelyn.
And my name is Wendy.
And we are Her Story.